Hello everyone, here's a new educational chess game. I'm playing black and my opponent starts with the pawn, c4, which is called the English opening. I'll respond with e5. My opponent is rated 1855. We're playing a 5-minute game plus 5 seconds per move. He plays knight to c3, so I'll play knight to f6. The idea is that the knight and the queen can support the push. d5, the central advance. He plays g3, so I play this push to d5. He can take, I take back, then he can play, for example, bishop to g2. There he exchanges, and maybe he'll play bishop to g2 now. That's exactly what's happening. This is typical of the English opening. We could try to defend the knight with bishop to e6 or c6. However, one of the main moves in this position is to move the knight again and place it on b6. Why? To allow the queen and the pawn to control the d4 square and prevent him from play d4 himself and free himself from this lack of space on the d-file. So I play knight to b6 to actually free up the queen's action and control the d4 square. If he plays knight to f3 to attack the pawn on e5, the knight to c6 comes to defend, and the knight will help control the d4 square, always to hinder that d4 push. I only want to leave him the move d3. He plays knight to f3, I play knight to c6, he will likely castle short. There you go, he castles short. Bishop to e7, and I'm going to look to castle short as well. Other squares for my bishop are less favorable. On d6, it interferes with my queen's control of d4. On c5, the bishop can be attacked by knights from o4 or by a3 and b4. If I had gone to b4, it could have been attacked by a3. So he plays d3, short castle, and now he plays a3. So here I can try to prevent this pawn push. b4, which he wants to play to give his bishop access to the b2 square and maybe even chase away my knight to capture the e5 pawn. So I can play a5. I'm also considering other moves. I had studied a trap. I think it involved the bishop. e6. He plays b4. I play a 5. He plays b5. I play knight to d4. And if he takes on e5, then there's bishop to f6 attacking his knight. And the other one is also in danger, because if he plays, for example, f4 to protect his knight, I could play knight to b3, protected by the bishop, to attack his rook. And then look to play queen to d4 check and win his knight. Do you see that? It's a tactical sequence that's impossible to find if you've never seen it before. But I know it. If I didn't know it, I would simply play a 5. But here I'm going to play bishop to e6. Let's see if he'll play b4. There, he plays b4. So now I'm checking my a5 line. I triple the attacks on b4. He plays b5, knight to d4, he grabs the pawn. Bishop to f6, I attack his knight, he'll play f4 to defend, for example. Then knight to b3 supported by the bishop, which attacks his rook. His rook moves, for example, to b1. Then queen to d4 check, and I capture his knight. And after a 5, b5, knight to d4, knight takes a 5, bishop to f6. If he comes back to f3, I exchange knights with check and take the knight. A 5. It's hard for white to resist playing b5, to attack the knight and capture the e5 pawn. Knight to d4, and now he thinks he can take the e5 pawn. Will he fall into the trap with the counterattack bishop to f6 along this diagonal? I also have the threat, bishop to b3. On queen to e1, knight to c2, the fork. But after bishop to b3, maybe he could have come to d2. And he plays bishop to b2, so he doesn't fall into the trap. But let's calculate anyway. After bishop to b3, let's imagine he plays queen to d2. I can go to c2, but the rook moves and it doesn't give me anything. Knight to b3, he'll play rook to b1, and it doesn't give me anything. So he didn't fall into the trap and my pawn is under attack. Then I can play bishop to b3 to force his queen to come. For example, to d2. Then my bishop leaves and I have this fork threat on b3. If I defend on e5 with f6, he can also exchange and the bishop will attack. b7. But still, my pawn is attacking his knight anyway. His knight has to move and I'll have time to play. For example, rook to b8 to defend b7, even if it's pretty passive. I'm still thinking. Bishop b3, queen d2. Do I have a smart retreat for my bishop? I don't see one. Well, that's a shame. I don't know here. I'll just play simply. f6. This is certainly not the right move, but I didn't find anything better. We'll look at the analysis. And I'll improve, by the way. If my opponents don't fall for the trap, I'll learn to play better. Because usually, in this type of position, either my opponents don't go into it or they fall for the trap. It's quite rare for opponents to get into this position without falling for the trap. I don't remember it ever happening to me, so now that it has, I'll be able to study and improve. That's why it's very important to analyze each of your games afterwards, to try to understand your mistakes. How do you analyze? On all playing platforms, including Lichess, which I'm using, at the end of the game, you can go back and look at your game and trigger the analysis. There's a little option that lets you get an analysis, and the computer will show you the moments where you could have played better. So now, after bishop to b3, I always look at this move. Queen to d2, knight to c2 with a fork. Alright, I'll play bishop to b3. Often in this type of position, people also play a 4. To fix things, a 3 to prevent him from being able to play. A 4, on the other hand, creates the weakness on b5. So he plays queen to d2, and here I have knight to c2, the fork. Alright, let's go. In the end, I still managed to break into his camp. He carefully defused the trickiest and most clever trap at the last moment. But on the other hand, he falls into a rather simple trap. With more time, actually, he had time to think. He still played a bit too quickly. He plays knight to h4. What's his threat? The bishop attacks b7. I'm going to take the rook right away. And now, certainly to prevent it, bishop takes b7. Maybe with knight to d5. Exchange the knights, then put my bishop back on d5. Offer piece exchanges since I have an extra quality. Knight to d5. So I don't have much time left, but those 5 seconds increment are really going to help me. He refuses to exchange knights. He's right. My knight, not a very good square. I do not have much time, so I play b6 to put it back on d5. So he plays knight to f5, putting pressure on the dark-squared bishop. I go back to e6 to attack his knight. I'm not afraid to give him the dark-squared bishop, but he doesn't want it. I offer the exchange of pieces again to try to relieve my time pressure. I have very little time left, so I need to play quickly. He doesn't want to. I play b6. The a5 pawn was under attack. Maybe I should have played a 4. Now I've just opened up the diagonal for him. I'll have to move my rook. On the other hand, if he plays a 4, he gives me the b4 square. I'm going to play rook to c8 to avoid any problems with the bishop-rook alignment. Even though sometimes you can give up the rook for the light-squared bishop to try to counterattack on the light squares around his king. His knight is short on squares. If I play a 5, it could be interesting, but then it weakens my e5 pawn. I'm going to play queen to d7 to attack h3, which he just presented to me, but he's going to play king to h2, that's almost certain. Careful, because if his knight wasn't there after the e4 push, my own knight would have no squares left. I'm going to have to free up a square for him. He plays a 5, he just gave me a square, but I'm going to play bishop to b4 because my bishop was also having trouble finding a move. He plays queen to c2. I'm going to move my bishop back to give the b4 square to my knight. We're going to use this b4 square with several pieces. Since I don't have much time, I'm playing a bit imprecisely. I also forgot that the h3 pawn is hanging. I'm attacking it and I actually forgot about it. It's the lack of time, of course. And then I was so sure he was going to defend it that to me he had already defended it. Alright, let's go back to d5. What I'm doing isn't very constructive, but it's to try not to fall too far behind on time and to try to make him, on the other hand, get a bit more behind on time now. I hope he'll make more mistakes than I do in the time scramble. For now, I'm playing solid, trying to hold on, maybe rook to d8, bishop to f8, I'll see. Just some solid little moves on my side, simply so that he doesn't have much time left and he's the one who cracks. So we can never push f5. It weakens e5 too much afterwards. You see, knight takes e5. It attacks the queen. It opens up the diagonals for his bishop. So that's a mistake you shouldn't make. That means his knight on e4, I can't touch it. The knight on c4, I can't really touch that one either. It's not easy. It's not easy to know how to proceed. There we go. He's offering an exchange. For me, exchanges are fine. But for him, he sees his time running out. He sees his time ticking down. So he's also looking for exchanges to ease the complexity of the position. That's a pawn to be targeted on the file. See, I exchanged the light squared bishops. Careful, if the knight moves, there's a check. But I'm able to come back with my bishop and my queen because otherwise there would be a check against my king. He comes back and I'm going to propose a queen exchange. He tried to checkmate me with that check, but queen to d5 secures everything. Now it's terrible for him because his knight remains under attack and the queens are going to be exchanged. And I'm going to be up a piece. If queen takes, I recapture, his knight is attacked and I'm up a piece. I have a light squared bishop. He comes back here, but my light squared bishop is having trouble getting out. Maybe bishop takes, king takes, queen to h1 check, he escapes to g4, that's very dangerous for him. Now, if I push h5, he has to go out to f5, but there might still be more checks. I'm hesitating. Or maybe bishop to f1. Let's play bishop takes h3, that's funny. We're going to force his king out, but I have to be careful with my own king. Now I'm threatening. Queen to g2, mate. So you're basically forced to take my bishop. There you go. I give a check. I can't play. Bishop to d6. He's going to take while giving me check. I can play g5. But he's going to come back to e3. Listen, for now I'm going to play. I didn't see what I could play, so I'll just go back to d5 calmly to secure my king. He goes to b3. I'm going to play f5. The idea is to give a check somewhere and take away that square from him. I'm going to check him. And now check, but he can go there, but it's dangerous for my king. Still, it's dangerous for my king. I'm going to move aside. I'm really afraid of a king facing off. He comes here, I'm going to trade. All right, check. I'm up a quality. Let's try. To weaken his king, I'm going to take away his last protective pawn. There we go, check. He's still going to try to hide with his king. My rooks need to be able to play, and that's not the case right now. I'm going to check here, maybe offer a queen exchange. He accepts. Well, that's good news for me. He goes to c6 and I push my pawn. Passed, he doesn't have a passed pawn. f6 was hanging. He could have taken it, but that would have led to an exchange, so maybe not the best for him. I'm going to activate my rook. He comes to f5, taking advantage of the pin. Let's give him a little check. Check. He didn't see the skewer. We take and take, which forces the exchange of the last rooks, and now it's easy to win. He should resign normally. The rooks are exchanged. I can go after the a4 pawn and then promote a pawn to queen. That's it, he resigns. So my opponent starts with c4, the English opening. I play e5, knight to c3, knight to f6. He plays pawn to g3, I play pawn to d5, he takes on d5, knight takes on d5, and bishop to g2. And here, I play knight to b6 so that my pawn and my queen control the d4 square and prevent him from playing d4 himself. He plays knight to f3, attacking the pawn, so knight to c6 to defend, kingside castle, bishop to e7, pawn to d3. This is all theory. For now, kingside castle, a3. And here you can easily play a 5, but I'm going to set a trap for him with bishop to e6. he plays b4, I play a5, so I encourage him to push to b5, which is what happens, and then knight to d4. And as you can see, he didn't fall into the trap. But if he had taken the pawn, thinking he was winning a pawn, he would have faced bishop to f6. If the knight moves away, it's pretty simple. We exchange knights, and I win the pawn on c3. And if he plays f4, then I can play bishop takes, pawn takes, knight to b3 to attack his rook. And on rook to b1, for example, queen to d4 check, fork, and then win his knight. But he doesn't fall into the trap. He plays bishop to b2. And here I wasn't really sure what to play. The computer suggests playing knight to b3 to attack his rook, and then playing f6. I played f6 right away, because I still didn't know whether it should be my knight or my bishop that should take advantage of the b3 square. And here he makes a mistake with rook to e1. My bishop comes to b3 to attack his queen, and I have the c2 square to make the fork. So queen to d2, knight to c2. Then he plays knight to h4, but he's going to lose the exchange. Knight takes, rook takes. Here, the computer suggests queen to c8 to protect b7, but it's still hard to play such a move, and to prevent the knight from coming to f5. I prefer to play knight to d5 to try to exchange pieces, but he doesn't want to. He plays knight to e4. Here, I definitely should have played f5, attacking his knight to capture the knight on h4. But at that point in the game, I didn't think of it. I played knight to b6. He goes into f5. I pull back my bishop to e6. What was important for me was to get my bishop out of his territory, because sometimes you enter the opponent's camp to win material, and you end up trapped, unable to get out. So it was very important for me to be able to get out. He plays knight to e3. I come back to d5 to offer peace exchanges, but he refuses. I have the material advantage, so I need to look for exchanges, but he doesn't want to. I play b6, rook to c1, rook to c8, he plays h3, queen to d7, he plays a4, and here I have no idea why I didn't take the h3 pawn. Well, actually, I do know. I had little time, but more importantly, this happens to me sometimes. I see the threat, I identify the threat, I play queen to d7 for that, to take his h3 pawn, and I just assume the opponent will defend, because opponents tend to do that. After playing h3, queen to d7, he could have simply played king to h2, and I just assumed he had defended even though he actually played a4. And above all, a 4 drew my attention to the right side of the board, while h3 was on the left, giving me the b4 square that I had been hoping to get for my bishop and my knight. So, as a result, I played bishop to b4, queen to c2, so I still have the h3 pawn that can be taken, but I don't see it. I play bishop to e7 to make use of the b4 square with my knight. And now he plays king to h2. Knight to b4, he plays the queen to b1. I go back to d5, he plays knight to c3. That's it, he accepts the exchange of pieces. Knight takes, rook takes. Bishop to d5, queen to a2, and there it is, my mistake. Here, I could have simply played. For example, rook fd8 pulled my bishop back, but instead I play bishop p2. And my opponent is going to make a mistake in return. He's going to play knight to p5, which will allow me to play queen to d5 and offer a queen exchange. But what should he have played? I invite you to pause the video so you can take your time to think about it. See you in a moment. So, did you find the move? It's not knight takes e5 to attack my queen and give check. It's knight takes b6, giving me check and attacking my queen. And most importantly, controlling the d5 square so my queen can't come back, and attacking my rook. So the best move for me would have been to play bishop to d5. If he takes with the queen, I can exchange queens and I'll still be up the exchange. So the best for him is to recapture with the knight. And here, certainly, play king to h8, to pull back. But this position is now favorable for white. My dark-squared bishop isn't doing anything. The c7 pawn is a target. He can play rook to c6 to try to pin me down. Fortunately for me, he chose the wrong square with knight to e5. So queen to d5. He goes back to c4. Bishop takes h3. That's the best move according to the computer. So I'm happy. Here, king takes. Queen to h1, check. And I'm going to miss the mate. King to g4. Here, there's mate in 6 moves. I'm going to play h5, which is still a good move, but mate could have been found with f5. King to f4, and look at what needs to be played. It was tough. I had no time. I couldn't find it. It was crazy. g5, that's the move to play. Bishop to g5, check, because if the king takes, there's mate on h6. and if the king doesn't take, he has to go to e5. But you can give check, for example, with the rook or the other one to keep the pawn protected, for example on f5. King to d4. And here you see it's impossible to find all these moves if you don't think it through. No time, had to play. Rook e4, check, computer says. If pawn takes, queen takes. And after rook to e4, check. If he goes to d5, this time rook to d8, checkmate. So there was a deadly extraction of his king. I could have checkmated him, but I had to start with f5. I played h5. He came to f4. I went back to d5. He played queen to b3 because his knight was pinned. So now he at least wants to be defended by the rook so he can move the knight. I play bishop to c5. He plays a4 and attacks my queen. Queen to g5, check. King to f3. I move out of the line with his queen. Knight to e3. Here I exchange. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. Queen to g4, check. King to f2, h4. That's normal. Pawn takes, queen takes h4, check. King to e2. The computer suggests f5 to free the rook, and it's true that it's very interesting. So why didn't I play it? f5. Certainly because I knew my opponent had a dark squared bishop and I didn't want to give him any counterplay. But I would have won earlier. I would have attacked his king sooner, so f5 was better. But I played. Queen to h5, check. King to d2. I offered the queen exchange and he accepted. And now I have an extra exchange, but I'm about to make a mistake. g5. Of course, he shouldn't take with the rook because that allows the rooks to be exchanged and to play on. King to g6, but he could have taken with the bishop. So g5, but he's like me, he plays really fast. King to e2, so king to g6, king to f3, rook to h8, he plays e5. This move e5 looks good with this pin, but actually it's losing. Rook to h3, check. He lost immediately by coming to e2 and getting hit by the skewer. But if king to g2, I would have taken on e3, threatening rook to e2 afterwards. Always the fork. If he plays rook takes, I exchange rooks and play rook e2. If he plays pawn takes, there is rook e2. If he comes to f2 to attack my rook, I go back to d3, win another pawn, and still threaten rook d2. So after rook to h3, check, he could maybe have played king to g4, but then rook takes e3. I'm also threatening d3 in the endgame, with an extra exchange and pawns that are still very much in my favor. So after rook to h3, king to e2, it ended there with rook to h2. No, it didn't end there because he kept playing, but there was no point anymore. So, as you can see, in this time control of 5 minutes plus 5 seconds, things go very fast. Obviously, since I'm commentating, I lose a lot of time and it distracts me from calculating. Of course, that's a bit of a handicap, so there are mistakes. But mistakes, after all, are part of life in chess. And the game was very lively, very eventful. I think it was interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can give me a thumbs up, leave comments, share the video, or support the channel. We'll meet again soon for new battles on the chessboard. Goodbye, everyone.